All right, this is the eighth episode of Writer's Block. We're a little later, coming out a little later this week because Sam had some issues with his wisdom. You know, he's the philosopher in Canada, and he had to get his wisdom removed to get down to the level of the casual Counter-Strike player. Sam, how you feeling, dude? Are you feeling okay? I got a little dose of it in the pre-show.
Yeah, no, things are terrible.
Things are terrible. Okay.
Yeah.
Does it make you feel better that like if I was gonna cut you from the show, it would have happened a week ago?
Oh, that's really unfortunate.
No, that's gonna make you feel better. Yeah, there's no guest this week because the schedule's in flux. We put it back like 4 or 5 days. I mean, we did a lot for you. I'm just saying that we want you around.
Yeah.
Your massive
I appreciate
it's sustained.
Yeah, I appreciate your mercy.
Okay, so this week I was thinking of there's these teams now that I think Strauss is a little boring saying at the top, and you have some pretty stable teams, Liquid, Navi at the top. We talked about these teams, but there's a couple guys like I think North is got a little better. I know you guys might disagree with it. ML a few weeks back. I thought NRG's a big story right now. Everyone's going HL where any negative comment is ruthlessly hounded down by the NRG players. I got a comment by Daps and Ethan liked my negative tweet just to let him know that he's watching over me in displeasure. But so I think it's and then maybe someone like an AGO as a surprise success. I think Sam mentioned NIP. We could talk about these teams later, but let's start with NRG. What is your they're all over Twitter. All the NRG guys are just so excited to talk about. They're all over Twitter again. Like I haven't seen that here, but now he's every other day I see him 10 times. But top 8 HLTV ratings. Do you think that reflects reality? Do you think they had a lucky run at Starlight in 5? What do you think, Max?
Ooh, throwing it straight to me. The cameras have been switched around, so is the auto Scott. Yeah. No, I don't know. I was always so linear with my focus on NRG just in looking at Cirque, just because of how immediate it was to watch his game. But over time, actually breaking down their game. Dude, have you heard of this little player called Breezy, though?
Yeah.
Motherfucker is insane. Blew me away. Like a legit international star. And I didn't know anything about Breezy before actually having to sit through some of NRG's games. So impressive to watch how well-rounded their fragging core is. Such a cool way of playing, a no-fuck sort of approach in terms of the way they call. Yeah, super interesting team to watch.
Okay, Sam, what do you think? You think top 8 is reasonable? We'll get into players in a second.
I have opinions about NRG. I think it might be top 8. No, I have.
Wisdom leaving it.
No. I think that they have massive problems, and I think they're a top 8 team. Probably they'll be fine, but I think that they have. And this is interesting. This is a little broad, but I think that they play way too passive, and it pisses me off. And it's very strange because wait. It's very strange because normally at shit NA teams or tier 2 NA teams play way too aggressive. And NRG definitely are tactically diverse and they can go aggressive, but their defaults are really, really passive, and it's punished them over and over again against a variety of teams. And that I think that they'll never be able to break through and let's say beat Liquid consistently. I know they got thrashed recently, but they'll never be able to beat them consistently if they don't fix this issue, which is they play their defaults on both sides of the maps are so passive that they give up very important parts of the map, like sewers on overpass. It's really irritating to watch, or mid on Mirage all the time. And I think that they by being so tactically sound or temperate, they become so safe that there's been an integrated risk in their safety where they just lose out on a lot of things. But when they go out on an execute, they have to check way more angles. They get punished way more. And I think that even though they have strong players and they have strong tactics and all that, just the way they approach defaults has been punished a lot at the tournament in which they made the finals at Star
Do you
Series.
think that's a result of the balance of like the temperament of the players or of the system? Because I look at their players and I think someone like Ethan, for example, is very, very much like sort of that side player, the anchor, the passive part of the team. Like I don't really see like, is it systematic or is it on a more individual, do you think?
Well, okay, I don't know how the players would play in other teams, but I know that all of them are more than willing to play aggressive because on their set plays, Ethan is very aggressive when it comes to set plays, even though he's very passive on defaults. Breezy is obviously an entry fragger. He can do whatever, and Cirque can also do whatever. So that I think they're perfectly comfortable doing it. Whether it's their propensity or not, I don't know. What I do know is that they'll give up a lot of map control for whatever reason. And it seems to just be the way they do defaults, since that's obviously planned. And it's on multiple maps. Like it's on Overpass, it's on Inferno,
Mirage.
It's Mirage. It's very, and I think that it just leaves them so vulnerable to off angles, so vulnerable to like CT pushes when they're on T side, and it's quite, and it also forces them to save quite a lot on CT side. So I don't know.
To someone like Fnatic, that's just cake. Like that, Fnatic eat that shit up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, the way I noticed it, strangely, is with North, which is the opposite of Fnatic. But at the beginning of their map on Overpass in their second best of 3, Valde kept pushing sewers because NRG wouldn't have a lurker at Monster at all, and NRG have actually been really impressive, and from listening to Cirque getting interviewed by Vakram, he says that I'm a Pet is making these adjustments, so credit to I'm a Pet. They made these adjustments halfway through halves, where they realize that they're getting exploited in a certain way and make adjustments in their default, which is very impressive. But they make set plays to counter what they've been giving up, and this is great. But for the first half of a half, they get severely punished for giving up map control, and I think that this is like a crucial problem. Like if you're going for a B execute and someone has pushed all the way through sewers and just shoots 2 of you down, and while you're unable to trade because you're not expecting someone to be in sewers, that's a massive problem. That just ruins your execute. And there's so many different instances of things like this across many maps and many different teams, because that's just like any team, once they realize that you have a soft spot in your default, is going to exploit it. So
okay, well, I think you brought up an interesting point that I sort of want to get into with NRG, and that's talking about DAPS specifically, because I think when you think of DAPS and looking at Optic, I remember writing articles in late 2016 about Optic, or mid 2016 about Optic when I first started writing about Counter-Strike, and what I noticed about Optic and DAPS and this calling style, it was not a default heavy team. My general thought that they had this very specific style where they tried to use mix to open into the round, whether that being entry with a rifle or an op. They do that for about 45 seconds. Then they sort of gather up, and they wouldn't really default. They just sort of hold the flanks. They wouldn't try to really fan out and look for stuff. And then they gather together, execute at about 30 seconds left, or 45 seconds left, almost every single round. Or that's painting with a broad brush. This is sort of the general formula. It didn't seem like they're a heavy team, a risk-oriented team, very safe, very vanilla, but it was a very specific style to them that worked decently enough, and that Stanislaw added upon when he took over as the in-game leader. Now, to Max's point at the very beginning of what this segment, you're talking about like the no fucks given style. I think I sort of have a thing with how I see the way DAPS' calling has changed. But I'm curious about what you specifically meant by that comment.
Oh, well, I was watching, I can't remember which, it was an Overpass game. I think it might have been, let me have a quick look here. I think it was against Liquid, or maybe not, maybe against North. And it was just I made a video on it. And essentially what had happened was, it was North. And like Valde was just beasting and feasting NRG at the B side, like playing this really sort of dynamic role and punishing a lot of what NRG were doing off the default, as Sam is talking about. And then there was this moment, like this key sort of momentum swing round, which they lost. And the half was definitely starting to go the way of North. And so when you're confronted with a problem like that, I always love playing armchair IGL, where I just sit there and like try to put myself in the shoes of the IGL and think what I would call in that scenario. And I'm thinking, oh, you know, like maybe like take fast long, like fake or that, except they call a timeout and then Pet just has this cheeky little smile on his face when he makes a call. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And they buy just 2 MAC-10s and rush Monster, and then just like you know, classic matchmaking strat, just literally rush 5B and then win the entire round because Valdez trying to like get in position and gets caught in transition. And so to just make that, and I titled the video like the big dick calls of NRG, to just make that like no fucks approach, just like, all right, well, if we're getting constantly slaughtered at B, like, let's just take the fight to them, you know what I mean? And so that actually ties into the point you were talking about before of how Pet adjusts sort of mid-half and can swing the momentum back. But also I think it's, I don't know, I think there's a lot to the point, I've been thinking about this a lot, just the like nothing to lose sort of mentality. And I think that definitely plays into it when you're against a side like North or a side like Liquid that plays so structured. That I think, and this comes from watching a lot of Fnatic games as well, just that idea of like when you're on the, like seeing how teams change their play style when they're on the 15th round, like if they're like just about to lose the game versus when they're on the 10th round, you know what I mean? And seeing how much the intangible of just going, oh, we have nothing to lose here, let's just play confidently and look for duels. I think that probably has to has a hand in the way NRG approach it, because I don't think they consider themselves world beaters. Maybe not on like social media, but but I don't think like realistically.
They're definitely trying to be. I'm sure they're just waiting for me to come up with something negative and then slamming me down. But I like it.
This is definitely going to get clipped.
Yeah. But I love it how that you always talk about the face cams and like how you always look for reactions as a theme of the show. So, oh yeah, I totally read it that he was thinking this. He gave this smirk. But you have a point there with the mixture of apps, and I'm a who's obviously has sort of this fame, this notoriety as a very demo watcher. But what I was thinking with not North, but NRG was not they do these risky low buy calls. They also will force buy, and they'll do like you said more default or risky plays, or they'll be a little bit more loose routine that you think of what I associated with DAPS previously, which was a very simple but structured team with players who were not as experienced. This is I think they're aware of the sort of core that they have of firepower with Ethan, Breeze, and how do you say that name, Cirque? Yeah, okay. But Sam, what do you think about this? Do you think is this sort of going against what you're saying, or is this lining up? Well, that they do more basic or risky stuff, but maybe their overall structure isn't properly set up in terms of defaults.
No, I think they're perfectly compatible opinions. The way that I would say it is that they have certain modes or certain objectives at the beginning of a round or certain call. If their call is a force buy or if their call is a fast play, then they're obviously not going to have the problem that I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is okay, let's just relax, let's just play our game. Their like default strat is to play a very passive default, sort of like you're talking about in the old Optic, and then eventually slowly creep in later in the round. The reason I dislike that is because I feel like the purpose of a default is to draw out utility and maintain map control so that you increase the chance of success during your execution. So I have a difficulty with that style.
Well, I think just to quickly jump in, it's like I think people so easily underestimate how difficult that style of like creeping map control is to play. Because when you talk, like you hear pro players talk about playing against Na'Vi or Astralis, you like hear that classic thing, oh yeah, they just play for the late round. And it's so dismissive because it's like, oh yeah, they just wait and then they just execute onto the site. But there's so much more to that, especially when you are watching Astralis or Na'Vi and how they default, because it's not like they're just holding map control passively and just posting up on angles. It's like they're so active on the default, but so safely. I think that comes down to the individuals and the way that the individuals approach the default rather than how the default as a whole is set up. Because I think someone like Electronic, I think someone like Dupree or Magisk, like when they're on a default, they feel so comfortable and they know exactly what they're going to do. They know exactly where their teammates are. And I think there's, way more to a T-side default than people might give it credit for.
I mean, I understand. Like, for example, let's say you have a connector player, like on Overpass, like Magisk. It would be different than playing like a different connector player. Let's say like Dupree, when he was playing connector, for sure. But what I mean more is like, let's say you take the old Kirby Glaive duo on Overpass, which would try to take bathroom control like almost every single gun round on their T side. Like that's a conscious decision to say, okay, well, we're trying to draw out utility and we're playing relatively passive and we're creeping slowly, but we're doing something with that time. We're trying to gain map control, maybe find a pick, and make it safer for us once we execute. But
and then device at the same time is like jiggle peeking long or something, because like Zipnik is like spraying through.
But that's a very active way of. That's not passive. Like it's safe. But it's different. Like what I'm trying to make a distinction between is you can be structured and play very differently. I think NRG play way safer, way more passive, and they're way more reluctant to push during their default pre-execute, right? Than someone like Astralis is. And I think that makes a big difference because Astralis are quite hard to catch off guard. If they relinquish map control, they're really aware of it and they'll be diligent to clear it when they go through. But so maybe it's because the players are newer, but they don't seem to catch on to the amount of or the possibilities that have increased by their relinquished map control.
It's also the different pressures that top teams can put on the default. Like it's way easier for someone like Mouse or FaZe who are so comfortable in like pressuring elite defaults to then pressure the safe default of NRG versus someone with complexity, which can easily get punished by the safe default of NRG if they try to be aggressive.
Well, sort of like in terms because Max is talking about like the big dick plays, the aggressiveness, while Sam is talking about like the safeness of it. But I think what I was trying to say earlier was that like I think they're just not that good at trying to gain map control. They seem like they do have to rush at the very end. They don't get enough map control, then they have to sort of force it. I mean, this is what I saw this on Overpass a couple times, I think, versus North. But I think they maybe not getting enough map control. Maybe they're going too slowly, but I think it's like about quality in terms of their default and how trying to not like a passive aggressive thing. Is this Sam?
Well, sure. You could say that. I mean, they definitely. I think it's more like it would be a better default if they were more active.
Yeah.
But what I think the big dick plays that Max is talking about are actually set strats. Like when they call set strats, when they've realized something about the other team and they try to adapt, they do really aggressive shit. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but they're perfectly willing to do it. But when they don't call a set strat, or when they're just trying to feel things out, when they're just running a default before they execute, they don't play it optimally. And they're actually better running the set strats that are very aggressive than playing.
I think that's what makes them a top 10 team, though, is the fact they do have the ability, like the depth of that T side. Because I think once you get sort of to like the Ty Lues of the world, say, I think they rely almost too much off of the default and they don't have those set fast strats. And when they do, it feels more like sort of like Ben Tetz realized a hole in the defense and he's quickly making this spur of the moment call as opposed to having a set thing that he can call that everyone's on the same page with. And so I think that's like a good like going back to the original thing of like, is NRG a top 8 team and is this ranking representative of it? I think being able to have layers of win conditions on your T side is huge. And even if they might not be able to necessarily win a lot of rounds against like the top 5 teams in the world off the default, I still think their ability to like withstand the pressure of teams below the top 10 off their defaults a massive reason why they can probably float around this level of play.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I would say I agree with you. Like, I think that their T side is dynamic and deep, which is really good. I just think that before in order for them to really become a contender, their T side would need to improve still.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the players real quick before we move it on to another team, because it seems. Well, first of all, let's just talk about Breeze and Ethan, because these guys aren't super well known. Like, my thought for like why I did never like put NRG as like a team to look out for. I never really trusted it because it was we thought the team like Daps, who I stopped caring about in like 2016. Fugly's like 2015. Like Ethan was like on LG in their dying days. Never really about him. Everyone was just like looking at Sub Rosa clips and calling him a cheat team, right? I mean, but then you get this sort of core now, Cirque, Ethan, and Sub Rosa and Breeze, where they're actually very strong players, but it's not like they have a known public identity where it's like instantaneous to the public who, it's not like a Cole or a Zitniks where they have a very specific identity. So just teeing up the ball on the baseball tee here for you. Sam, maybe I'll give you the opera. What do you think of Cirque as an opera? Like, how would you define the way he plays in comparison to others?
Cirque is interesting. You need to distinguish between Cirque Online and Cirque on LAN for now. Yeah. He plays a little different. Cirque is Cirque is a mechanically like elite opera. Like Daps mentioned, I forget to who, his movement is like really, really good. So that's already a boon, but he's also very fast, he's very accurate. But what's strange about Cirque is that he's not super assertive right now. Yeah. He's definitely not like Mertz or Draken or someone like that. I think his best comparable, at least from his heroic days, because I haven't watched much Optic yet. Yeah. His best comparable would be Yugi. I think that Yugi is a similar kind of opera who can definitely anchor and definitely move around the map for you, but doesn't of himself take the initiative to do some massive early round plays regularly.
Also a good rifler.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was going to ask, he's rifling a lot, and I wonder if that's different than his online games. Is he opping more online? Have you watched online games of him to say that? Because I thought it was almost strange how little he was operating at some times. I thought I just heard this reputation of he's a sick mechanical operator, and when he has the it looks very mechanically strong. It looks visually impressive.
Yeah, well, I don't know about online, but he does rifle a lot, and I think one of the reasons is because they probably know that using an op on T side is a pretty significant economic risk, and if you have a player whose rifle is perfectly serviceable and who isn't like Oscar, isn't the type of opera who will try to entry on the T side with the AWP. Like there's very little reason to buy the op when you could, or when you already have an AK, or when it would be risky to buy the op. And so in this sense, you have a luxury with a player who's so talented to get the rifle. I think it's really good, and I think that more teams should be willing to give up the op on the T side, at least like half of the gun rounds.
Right,
like he can like anchor parts of the map on the CT side with a rifle as well. That was the thing that blew me away the most, was not just how good he was mechanically as a rifler in the sense that we might think of, Yugi or Woxic's rifling, but just in his like how dynamic he was with the rifle. Like he feels the way he approaches gun rounds with the rifle almost like a hybrid player to me, like so insanely talented.
Yeah. But Max, you were talking earlier about Ethan, and I was sort of thinking of the Breeze pair, and I was trying to come up with a good analogy, maybe like something like a config magic sort of thing. Talk with NRG. Breezy seems like a much different player than how you were describing Ethan earlier. How would you compare and contrast those two guys? Probably the leading two performers just in terms of raw output on that team.
Well, yeah, Dapp said in the interview I did with him, I don't know if it was actually in the text, but he says Ethan was the best site anchor in North America in terms of, which is, maybe a bit of bias there. But, I think Ethan's like in terms of his age and his tenure, he seems so comfortable in a lot of high pressure scenarios. And that feels like a massive boon to a team because it's so hard to train that, I think. And it's so hard to, I don't know, it feels that his level of play is disproportionate to like the cost of getting him onto the team, and that he's such he brings a lot that players I don't think innately bring to the side in terms of being able to play a lot of spots that like Cash, I'm thinking on the A side, and like the ability to play off of rotators really well, and the ability to mix up his pacing on T sides, I think it's really impressive. But I can't really comment too much beyond that because I haven't like sat down and watched POV demos. But based on like watching NRG's game overall, I'm impressed with him.
Yeah, but you were saying before the show, you were about to go off on how great Breezy was. Do you want? I don't know if you've watched any specific demos, but what just basic impression of how good he is, how good he.
It's just consistency, man. It's consistency. Like it's game to game, series to series, tournament to tournament. That's what blows me away the most about him. Is like because it's like I can't understand how I don't know who this player was before, based on how good he is at international lands. Like there was no hype around Breezy as a player. Is it Breezy or Breeze? I like the exotic. Okay, Breeze, fair. Yeah, but like there was no like hoo-ha or anything about this guy, at least in my world, before I started looking at his stats and looking at what he could do in game.
Yeah,
that's what blew me the way.
It's definitely interesting. I mean, I was sort of actively not trying to watch NRG games because I was fed up with the hype just from online games. But no, Breeze definitely seems like it's like an aggressive, like explosive entry. Very impressive from what we've seen so far. But maybe just to cap off the North topic, not the North NRG topic. They're too similar, but I sort of noticed that their two biggest wins so far on LAN: a best of 3 versus Liquid, a best of 3 versus North. But they've also lost to North once in a best of 3 and lost to Liquid twice in a best of 3. I mean, our NRG didn't make the finals of Star Ladder iLeague Star Series Season 5 or whatever. And they made the playoffs at ECS, even though that's an 8-team tournament, and all they had to do was win 2 best of 1s. Do you think that NRG will continue to have these good results? Do you think they can win a best of 3 series? Okay, maybe this is a good way of getting to a specific. What's the best team they could beat in a best of 3 series if there was a tournament tomorrow? There probably is a tournament tomorrow that I don't know about, but yeah.
I would jump on it and say I'd say Mouse.
Bella Horizonte. I'd say Mouse. Well, I mean, Liquid's better than Mouse, and they beat Liquid. So
sure, yeah.
I mean,
1 out of 3 best of 3 series though.
Yeah, I would say they could I'd probably put my money almost on NRG to beat Mouse.
Ooh,
it depends.
Well, I just based on Mouse versus AGO at Star Series.
Mouse today is pretty bad. Mouse like a month ago, 2 months ago, very different. I think that if you have like a confident Sunny and a confident Oscar, then they would probably wreck NRG, at least sometimes. But I don't think that they're playing like that at all. I don't think Oscar's been very good. I don't think Sunny's been very good. So I don't I just don't. Actually, Chris J said it himself. He thinks none of the players are in form right now. So
I think Chris J himself is in form. Like he played well at Star Series.
I don't know.
Yeah, I thought he played well at Star Series.
So I don't know. I watched one Mirage game when he whiffed a lot of shots, but otherwise I don't know. But the point, he said that, and I actually agree with that. Normally I'm skeptical, just like lame answers like that, but I actually think that just their individual players are playing pretty poorly. So the energy would probably beat them right now. But I think that Mouse. If you take on average in the past 6 months, I think Mouse would be precisely the kind of team that would be able to take advantage of NRG, at least on NRG's T side.
All right. Yeah. Well, moving on to North, which we a couple weeks ago had probably the most animated discussion we ever had on this show. Furious debate about whether MSL was complete garbage and needed to be replaced, or passable, decent, acceptable human being from my end. But then right after that episode, pretty quickly after, and I tagged you guys as soon as it happened, they make top 4 at a big international tournament. Not the best international tournament, pretty good size. And they won that, what was the tournament called? Where they beat Hellraisers in the finals? Tours. So North all of a sudden gets a little streak in form. I actually have a heel turn that I'm going to introduce here, but what do you think about this turn with North here? Do you think they've improved? Do you think they just got soft opponents? What do you think, starting with Sam's time?
I think North are pretty bad, but I think Mertz has improved. I think Mertz has improved. I think AZ has improved.
Yeah.
But I think that as a team, North are still a bad team.
Okay.
And I think that their results reflect that. I mean, they've lost to not excellent teams at this tournament. Like this tournament, I'm pretty sure they won as many best of threes as they lost, or maybe not quite. But they beat Hellraisers, they beat NRG, they beat Godsend, and they beat AGO. But they lost to NIP, and then they lost to NRG. So that's not very impressive in my books at all. They also lost to Mouse. So, and I think that the biggest problem with them right now is they don't. Okay, this is going to be a weird gooey thing, but I feel like either maybe they're talking too much, but they sort of wander around as if they're not focused on what they're doing. Like they're just kind of walking around while listening, and they look distracted a lot of the time. They don't check all their angles, and they just kind of get caught off guard all the time. And so at this tournament, I wish I had statistics for this. Unfortunately, I don't. But they lost against so many force buys against every team. Like it's not just. I know NRG has like Daps, who gets more kills with the CZ than any other weapon, but otherwise, like against every team, they kept getting. They kept losing anti-ecos, and this is a massive problem. The only reason, like, it's not like their setups are terrible. They would just not pop someone's head right away. It's like the crosshair wasn't at the right place, or they're making plays when they shouldn't be, or they're over aggressive, not anticipating a stack. Or it's just like really dumb things, and they just keep going over rotating all the time. They got faked out.
Game, right? On Inferno versus NRG. That was pretty rough, right?
That's not even the one I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of a round against AGO. I think it was on Dust 2.
Yeah.
Where like a couple flashbangs or something, and 5 people on the A side, and AGO just waltz into.
I think those two things you're talking about are linked, though. I think there's just, generally speaking, a lot of doubt on this team, but not necessarily like an individual doubting himself as much as doubt in like the system of play. And I think that doubt leads to players like AZ being spectacular in a lot of situations because he's like almost forced to bait and like makes these ridiculous, one tapping 1v3 clutches. But I think it also, as a result, like leads to over rotations and a lot of anti-eco losses when they're forced to sort of play on the back foot, not really getting forward against the pistols, like confidently taking the duels and just getting bodied by the CZ whipping around corners.
Yeah. Well, you guys remember the discussion last time we talked about North. I was of the opinion that, just give MSL some better players. He's doing what he can. AD's not great anymore. Kirby's not great anymore.
Just the abused fucking housewife. Just like.
But here's my turn. I'm like watching this tournament. You see Kirby still about not 100%, pretty average per his level. Well, like mediocre per his like max his ceiling, right? But then you see AZ have a couple of good series, one bad series versus NRG, but Mert's looking a bit better. I think it looked a little more comfortable in the last couple tournaments, but I think it was really bad look for. It was a really bad look for North. That one Dust 2 game versus AGO and that one NRG game Inferno. That was when the AGO game is when they were up like 14 to.
Oh, and it was their T side, wasn't it?
Yeah, and their T side, where they just looked so lost, hitting the A side over and over again, and they being aggressed on by AGO and just dying over and over. And then the game versus NRG on Inferno, this game around it was so bizarre. And this almost reminds me of an old Sam theory that, and it sort of goes to Max's point as well here, that they seem to have this crumbling effect. Because both of these games, these bad halves happened in the second half of these games. Almost like a lack of confidence, bad calling by MSL. But my point generally, to go back to the top, was that, it seems like MSL is really letting down this team in terms of his calling, and in terms of, I know Sam had Max. You had that tweet out where you were praising his CT calling. That info game was really rough to watch. Maybe Sam first to respond to it because I sort of threw him. I wanted to piggyback off his old theory, but then maybe Max.
Yeah, I just still think that there's something to that theory. I mean, a lot of different players now. So I think from when I said that, the only remaining players are MSL and AZ. But that is it is a massive problem for them over and over again. I don't know, but I'm hesitant to blame these things on MSL because I don't know. I don't know who.
Complete reversal from last time.
No, because if you want to talk about his individual play, I thought he was dog shit. So, but as for calling, I don't know. Like I think that there were some really nice setups for North. I thought that they had some really good halves where I was impressed with their team play. But just sometimes it's just like. But the thing, like losing to Anti-Ecos, is that really like, which was probably the biggest problem they had this tournament. Like, is that MSL's fault? Like sometimes it is, because sometimes he gets flashed in and just misses a spray and just can't connect a spray, and that's okay, he loses. But generally it's not a calling thing, it's the way that the individuals approach the duels. If the individuals approach the duels poorly, then they're going to get overwhelmed, or caught off guard. And I don't know if it's that. I feel like it's almost the atmosphere of the team, or the way that they approach the game, where they just don't feel comfortable putting their foot down when it really matters. Like let's say they're like NRG, but they don't have those set strats where they just go really ham and just take off their shirt, flex, and try to strangle, chokehold the other person. Like they don't do that, and their players aren't like that. I thought when Mertz came on that Mertz might be a bit like that. And I think he has been at this tournament. I thought he was really good, especially like in the late round. He was very good. But I don't know. The rest of North just seemed like, when I look at the individual players, like Kirby seems to be making good plays in the late round and all that. But
AZ,
obviously, yeah. But it seems like every player is doing well, but somehow it doesn't mesh into a cohesive whole when it comes to when it's time to close it out.
So I have like dozens of conspiracy theories about North, because they are such a frustrating team to watch, because when they're on the front foot, I think it's honestly goes back to the momentum thing for North. Because I honestly think when they're on the front foot, either side, MSL is such a good caller. Like when he can actually dictate the momentum of a round on CT side, like you see his mind work. He's got excellent reads, feels comfortable structuring CT aggression. Everyone feels like they know what they're doing. He starts playing better individually, but he's still a dog shit player, so we're not going to get into that. But like on T side, I think they also play like they're really comfortable playing this really sort of faster brand of CS, especially when MSL is like feeling the momentum of the round and feels like his team can take individual duels. I see them like really, really often. I think Professor from HLTV asked MSL that question, and MSL was like, oh yeah, we just have a lot of fast strats. But I think it's also more so just when they're feeling the game, it's that those really, really frustrating intangibles of like confidence and atmosphere and things that you can't really analyze in a demo. But when you analyze so many North games and there's just this wild inconsistency between when they're behind and like they just crumble so hard, and it's the individual skill is still there, and I think that's why AZ looks so good at certain points, because even when they're crumbling, he's still put in these like, late round situations where he might lose a 1v3 clutch, but he'll one tap two people, and it's like, oh wow, AZ is still playing really well. And I think Mertz, it definitely feels like he gets micromanaged a lot by watching his game. I think he, I don't know whether he's being managed more so, which is why he's looking better, or he's just become more open to being managed. But I saw some instances where very clearly like he had something come to him and then he went to walk one way and then like suddenly changed direction, if you know what I mean. And it's like, oh, I don't think that was natural. I think someone like told him to move there. I don't know. I'm reading into this way too hard. I'm like looking for the grassy knoll shooter and shit. Like Valde, I think played really well. If we want to talk about him, like I think he had a sick overpass game against NRG. Like I still think Valde is insane. He's obviously had his dips in form, but it goes back to what you're saying as well, Sam, which is like there's none of these players, bar MSL, which you can almost forgive, are playing bad individually. It's just so annoying to watch North, and it's this like weird sadism I have for trying to figure out how they lose these games.
I think one second. Just I think Mertz definitely, like, he's definitely being put in a lot of like set strats.
Yeah.
Like even just early in, you could tell like it's just okay. You're with this guy, and you guys are going to do this, and that's great. I think that it helps him a lot. It gives him direction. But I also think that he's developed much better game sense in the late round. And maybe that's people coming to him, but I just feel like I was watching him just in late round situations doing clutches or 2v3s or things like that, and he just seemed really diligent when it came to angles and seemed to really understand what the opponent's play was, which I thought was a really big problem with him before.
Yeah.
See, I put that down to the micromanaging though. Like when I saw that, I was like, oh, because it was such not just like a rapid change in the way he played, but like the way he approached a situation that I thought, oh, I don't know if that can be such a penny drop moment, because 2 tournaments ago, what was it, bet.net or something? Like what was that? Like nearly a month ago, he was a totally different player than what we saw at Star Series. And so I would attribute that far more to like players helping him out rather than this complete, like ayahuasca ego dissolving trip where he like reevaluates himself as a player, Yeah.
Well, I think he's still a similar player in a lot of ways, but I think that I just don't think that when it comes to him being in the late round situation, it's realistic to think that like people are calling out wherever everyone is, and then he's suddenly turning and all that. Like, I don't think I think that information isn't spread out so suddenly, like 30 seconds after everyone is dead and he's just roaming around and stuff. I do think that there's something to playing the game and knowing what's possible for other people. I still think he has other problems. Like, I think that he still has trouble with consistency when it comes to
especially on CT side. Like, I think
so. Here's my theory. Let me know if you agree. I think that when he's like close to mid range, he has a really hard time hitting shots. And so when you're putting him, like, let's say he's holding catwalk on CT side, but really close, he'll almost always miss that shot and get killed. But
also white box on cash, I'm thinking as well.
Yeah, like, but if you put him, let's say you put him instead of that, you put him at car, or you put him, I forgot the other ones, but you put him on car, I think he's way more likely to hit the shot, both on cash and car on dust too. Like, I just
Wasn't that what Cajun B was known for as well? Or am I misremembering that? I don't know why.
Maybe whatever people said to make people think that Cajun B was a decent offer, but whatever. But I think whatever they're doing, I think the fact that Mertz is playing like a pretty good... I mean, his HLTV rating is kind of high right now. It's like 1.17. That's a little high, but I think that because they played like a bad tournament recently. But I think that you'll probably see him hover around the 1.12 or something like that, which is good, which is an improvement. Like, that seems he's just as pretty good as every other player on the roster, and that's a nice change. But I think because people were shitting on it, we were shitting on him before. Yeah. Like, I think he's genuinely evolved into like a fine player.
Yeah. I think I definitely noticed an improvement with him watching games in preparation for this episode. But I also had this comment. Me and Max had a little bit of an exchange on Twitter the other day, where I just, because MSL did well, I call you guys out. Like, ooh, MSL did well, Sam and Max. But Max, you quote tweeted that, and we're pointing out how often MSL and North do well on CT sides. You credit that to their CT setups and his ability to read the game and that sort of thing. But there's this really weird thing that I've been thinking about, where when you think about one of their older rosters, say one of them with both Magics and Config, they had way more firepower, but they had this reputation as being a T-sided team but struggling on the CT side. And
yeah, true. Yeah,
but now it's the reverse is true, where they seem to be a very much a team that doesn't have great firepower. A lot of decent players, and that Mertz is improved and AZ is hit a bit of streaky form. But now they're doing well on the CC side instead of T. It's like their weaker firepower. People usually associate firepower with T. I know these are super broad generalizations, but it seems like I'm not sure I grasp this weird dynamic completely. Like, I was that there's CT sides of North were a big problem for a long time, where they never seem to be able to fit the right players to the right spots. What do you think about this, Max? Do you have any thoughts on this one?
I'm thinking more, because I think when you talk about CT sides in that sense, it's a lot about like cohesion and team play and the ability to play sides and like in transition. I'm thinking more so in just like if you were to remove the individual element from Counter-Strike and just play on the macro level. And it's like, all right, on paper, North should win this round based on their CT setup. And I think MSL actually is a really good caller of the game in that way. And I think that he's just played so many rounds and he's gone through so many different iterations of teams that it's very, very hard not to at least give him some credit of experience in him knowing like the pace of a game, and that when he is behind and to make plays, and when he is ahead to pressure T sides. But yeah, I think it's far more in the relation of the players and in the individuals and how they approach around, less so than MSL's ability to call a tight setup, which I think is definitely there.
Yeah, my theory, I was definitely the coordination. I feel like it just works better with the roles. It seems like they have a better role cohesion with what they have now. Sam, do you buy this? The original thing that sparked this was actually an article you wrote about AZ's positions versus Magic's CT positions, and how you thought they MS using Magic's. And I actually saw, I think, Maui Snake on a Counterpoints episode say something similar. Magic's was set up for a lot of late star or high impact positions. What do you think? What do you think about the roles on North now? Do you think they're more cohesive, which leading to the better CT size in addition to the MSL's calling, or how do you make sense of this weird dynamic in your mind?
I don't know if their CT sides or their T, like, I don't know if their CT sides are better or if their T sides are worse. Like, it's a weird, like, whenever you talk about a team being good on T side or CT side, you like have to really check everything, because sometimes a team just gets on a roll or wins a pistol or something. So, like, for example, they had really bad CT sides just from memory against AGO and RNG, but they rolled on their T sides, they had really bad T sides against those teams, but they had really good T sides against Hellraisers. Yeah. So I don't know if it's that. Like, to me, when I looked back, way back when I used to be really invested in North, I would look at it, and it seems like it seemed to me like it's not so much about which half it is or which side they're on, and rather if it's half number 2, they're going to do noticeably worse than if it's half number 1. That seemed to be the trend then. I don't know about now, like, but it definitely, like, obviously that was exacerbated against AGO, but they're fine on CT side. They seem a little lost on a lot of maps on T side, especially like the Dust 2 against AGO was really concerning. But that's the one that sticks out. But on the CT side, they're fine. Like, they have some pretty decent team play. Like, but I don't think that they're anything beyond okay. Like, I think, so for example, when you're talking about MSL's calling, yeah, I think it's pretty good. But then again, and this is not MSL's fault, but like against AGO, during a force buy, somehow a player was able to go from T-Con all the way to Ivy and kill 2 players with a CZ just walking through without anyone noticing. And I remember that. That's a team play thing. That's like, oh, we mollied this, but we didn't check the only other pathway they could have taken because they were Molotoved. And that's just like brain farts. I still think so. I don't know if they are actually that good on CT side. If anything, the amount of times that they get wrecked on force buys leads me to think that they have a lot of problems on CT side.
Yeah, but that's not like a CT or a T problem. That's like what we're going back to is just a T, like the team problem, and just more.
Right. I just think, but they got ecoed. The ecos that I noticed were at least more prominent on the CT side, like holding B side overpass or something like that.
As it always will be, though, given the nature of pistols in the game.
That's interesting. Some people disagree. Like, a lot of people think that, because you can hold tight angles with CZ on CT side, you can get more kills. But anyway, I agree with you. I think that the T side
on the pistol and the weapon, like the speed, the move, and that sort of thing. Like,
when the Tech 9 is strong, you can move very fast. You're gonna have a lot of advantage on.
Well, that's interesting. I was just thinking about this earlier with the CZ near. Maybe this is gonna be a huge buff to the North. You know, they're not gonna have to deal with as difficult rounds. But make sure you're talking to me about the show about doing some research on AGO. They're sort of a surprise team, like a Polish team, names I haven't heard of. Maybe I haven't done my due diligence on the Polish scene, but I haven't heard of these guys before, and that they make a pretty good splash over at Star Ladder. What do you general thoughts on this team? Like, what
Well, I think the best way to frame AGO, because there's so much to talk about in terms of their play. Like, they are one of the most interesting teams, partly because I didn't know anything about them. So it's like this constant process of discovery of all these different layers to the side. But a good way to frame AGO is that they have the most recorded official matches on HLTV in 2018 so far. They play so many games, it's ridiculous, and it's the same core as well. And they've changed IGLs. I think it's Furlan is now calling, who's their entry fragger, except it used to be TOAO, Tao. I don't know. I don't listen to casters talk over the names, but he used to be. So he's like sort of the like third man in, second man in. He used to be the caller, but now they've got this sort of Chris J type situation going on, where the IGL leads from the front, and yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things to talk about AGO with, because they don't feel like a European tier 2 team that we normally think of. Like, they're not, they're puggy, but they're not. They look to a star AWPA for their win conditions, but they don't really. They change IGLs, but does that really matter? Like, and I'm doing a piece on them right now, and like I ask all these questions, and it's like they answer in the affirmative for all these questions we usually pose to like sort of tier 2 European sides on the rise. But then there's also like this extra caveat to it all the time. Like at Star Series, Snatchy was a massive reason why they won so many best of threes, especially against Mouse in that best of 3 series. But at the same time, like, you can easily credit so many impact rounds and consistent like clutches and things to every single member on AGO. Like, every single member of AGO had a big game at some point in this tournament. And that sort of is the Mouse Sports way of doing things. It's like just a really well-rounded, cohesive fragging core. It's how Greyhound were able to beat SK and make a lot of impact at IM Sydney. It's how all these tier 2 teams, it's how Renegades are able to do it, just having like this really cohesive ball of talent that plays the way they want to play, which I think you're just going to get, like this sort of unique feel for executes. Like, they have a lot of really strange timings in the way they approach their hits, and we saw them punish Mouse a lot on the T side, on Mouse's CT side of train, in which they'd like execute onto a site, send like 1 or 2 players out onto the site and hold the map control in the pre-plant, and then be able to punish the CTs peeking for information. And it's like a lot of these really sort of off-kilter ways of approaching rounds that I think caught a lot of teams off guard. And that'll obviously go back to the thing like, all right, well, that's probably going to get figured out, that AGO want to approach rounds like this over the coming tournaments. So we'll see their success diminish just by virtue of them having to evolve past their comfort zone. But I think they're a super, super interesting team. And I'm, like really interested to see how they perform coming up.
Okay. Well, you make an interesting point where you mentioned teams like Greyhound, and I'm sort of a bit cynical, like I was saying before. I refused to watch energy games because I thought it was just useless hype. Same thing with Greyhound. I just straight up not gonna watch those games. Like,
dude, inject Australian CS straight into my veins, baby. Like, give that shit to me straight up.
Well, like, I just think like teams like Tyloo back in the day when they first showed up, and like surprise teams with, like, I remember them going into Star Ladder Season 2 and surprising Navi with these weird double short setups on Mirage, like where they were really confusing teams and winning these strange games. And I just think it's bullshit, like I don't know how long this is gonna last. And
it's novel.
There's all this hype for Tyloo or NRG. I'm just a cynic or whatever. Like, I think I want to smack down any rising star the dirt where they belong. But Sam, what do you think about AGO? Did you watch any of the games? Can you collaborate? Yeah. Can you fight back against my optimism?
Actually, I'm going to concur and add to it. So, okay, before I state my opinions, I will say I watched the best of 3 again against North, and I watched Mirage against Mouse Sports. So there's a lot of games that they did really well in that I didn't watch because we had to watch so many teams. Thanks, Scott. But so I thought that there was a massive difference in the way they played between the playoffs and the group stage, and maybe that's just the games that I watched, but I thought they looked like shit against North, and I thought they looked pretty good against against Mouse. Like I don't think they did anything cheesy on Mirage against Mouse. Like it seemed mostly like they did they did a couple fakes and stuff that was good, but mostly they just like had two people Palace that would one tap Oscar at stairs like every round.
Oh, they had like one round where like two players like walked out of a Palace smoke, like just like some weird like timings, like contact hits. That
but generally they're just playing like regular ATAKs, and they have one lurker in mid or something, but like it just seemed like just pretty basic, like awesome play, which was great. Against North, they looked really, really lost, in my opinion. Like I know they took a map off and they did well, I guess, on train. Like they did really poorly, and then they recovered but still lost the second half. But like I'm just thinking of like how they played Ivy again on train on their T side against North, where they would just have one or two people there just standing around getting spammed out, never actually pushing, even when they had the AZ, who's the North Ivy player, caught. They wouldn't push him. And then they would just do weird plays where like one person would rush it alone, but they wouldn't rush it when they had three people there. And they kept bleeding out, and it just seemed like they didn't really have a plan, and they just decided to lollygag around there. And it felt like they were very, very tentative. When they were doing executes, they didn't want to commit. Like I remember once AZ on Dust 2 got a 3K with a scout because they were just like standing there waiting for him to peek instead of moving while in between his shots. I just thought they looked like they were scared a little bit, and I think that that's a sign. I took that to be a sign of it's their first big playoffs and they're going to be a little more scared. But I think that it was a weird thing. Like, I didn't think they looked like confident. I didn't think they looked dominant. And they had a lot of skill, and in fact, in that series, Snatchy wasn't the biggest like fragger. Actually, the standout one for me was Grubby or Grubby, whatever. Yeah, who I thought was really good. And so individually they look good, but like maybe you can explain to me what they're doing very well and how they won those other best of threes, because to me they just looked like a team that was shitting their pants when they were playing against North.
Yeah, well they play like
Max,
very sort of cookie cut.
Oh, sorry. Smackdown, don't hit him in the jaw. Hit below the
No, it's true, because it's like they play pretty cookie cutter CS. Like they won't be pulling out an execute that you haven't seen before, and there's nothing remarkable in their strat book. And that's also, I think, due to them changing RGLs. I don't think there's this like incredibly deep sort of tactical approach. I think it's the strength of AGOs and how they're able to use the cohesiveness of their lineup and their very clear comfort with each other to run variants off of those cookie cutter ideas. And they seem at their best to never be really out of like any XVX situation, because they've just played so many rounds together and they have this like awesome intuition in how to play retakes. But I think the thing against North was how North were able to, and that goes back to why I was praising North CT sides against AGO, was how they didn't let them run those variants off the cookie cutter ideas, and how they didn't let these XVX situations, they didn't let like AGO get on the front foot. I think we saw AZ have like a lot of good moments. We saw Mertz had a lot of dominance against AGO. And I think it's also hard because, for example, the Mouse series, like I think that could have easily been a 2-0, because if you saw the one game that Mouse won, it was literally like some of the most unreasonable shit Mouse was doing in order to win that game, like 16-14. I think if Mouse were playing like 10% worse, it would have been a 2-0. But I don't think that's necessarily AGO playing super well as much as it's Mouse being a fractured side and clearly being on sort of the downswing in terms of form. And then at the same time, when we look at the North game, is that North playing really well or AGO not playing themselves because it's in the playoffs? So I think it's really, really hard to dissect a team like AGO, given that they only have the one sort of big tournament to go off of. And it's really hard. But I think they played like a really solid brand of CS. And I even think that like best of 3 against North, while there was definitely some one-sided moments and some super tilting moments on Dust 2 from North, I think it was an excellent series to watch. And I think the quality of CS was very, very high between those two teams, especially not just like round to round, but half to half, and how both teams thought about like the overarching sort of momentum of the game. And it really blew my mind because, you know, obviously we don't watch, and I'm sort of speaking generally for all of us, but we don't like watch, you know, like tier 2 CS as much. Like, it's not like we're all like super analyzing the 10th to the 15th best teams in the world. And so to then suddenly see like this North and Asia game and seeing some really high level ideas executed by both teams, like that was more impressive to me than like AGO specifically, just like how they pushed each other. I got off topic. That's okay.
You know, it's good. It's good. Like just to sum up this team, what are your expectations? Do you think they can even be in? I mean,
I think they like flirting outside the top 10 for sure. The biggest caveat to that is the individual skill is super important. I don't see anything that would suggest like a rapid drop off in the individuals of AGO outside of them being figured out. Because I mean, even if you look at the Mouse series, like Snatchy was regularly outdueling Oscar and Chris Jane or Bjorkdals, but at the same time, like you're still getting picked by like an out of form Oscar. So to me, that's like positive in the sense that, okay, well, you know, Snatchy's confident against Oscar, but then like next time they face, does Oscar outduel him? Do they figure him out? So yeah, I would say probably outside the top 10 based off their form from Star Series. But if they just fucking like shit the bed and didn't do anything as most of these sort of teams expect to do, then it would be unsurprising as well.
All right, Sam, validate me. Tell me they're never going to do well again. You're never going to hear these guys again.
Okay. I actually think that if they play like they do against Mouse, against North, they win that series. So I think they should be like. It's worth noting that AGO has actually like had a lot of good upsets online for a long time now, and so it's not like a new thing that they beat pretty good teams. Like they beat pretty good teams for quite a bit of time. So it wouldn't be strange to me if they kept beating good teams. Like I would expect them to be able to push someone like Fnatic or someone like Nip or something like that. I think that's totally reasonable. I do think that it's a distinct problem in the playoffs, but I also don't think that they got to the playoffs by doing something very unique or something very cheesy, which should reinforce the idea that they will continue to be pretty good. It's also worth noting that they have like a really, really deep team in terms of firepower. And like when you see with like Greyhound or all these teams that are having a lot of upsets, that's kind of the thing, is that anyone can frag at any time, and that's super valuable. And I think that...
Sorry, Scott, do I have your permission to personally attack Sam right now?
Yeah, go ahead and
I think
hit to the
AGO would eat Space Soldiers up in the best of 3. I think they fucking Red Velvet Cages. Eat that shit up, son.
They've played against each other before.
My worst an actual result.
Yeah, they played against. Let's check. But during the time, I actually think that there's similar kinds of teams.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that like the in terms of their style, but the individual players are quite different actually. Like obviously Snatchy is a star opper, and Space Soldiers don't really have an opper, so immediately there's quite a significant difference. But I think that I think
T-side's similar. The T-sides, like in terms of the way they approach the game,
I think it's a good example of two teams that should be around the same level. Actually, like just to bring it back, like I think that they should both hover around the like 10 to 15. Somewhere like slightly better than Hellraisers, but slightly less good than Hellraisers should be. Sort of between that range. I think is where you can expect AGO to be. So pretty good. They're pretty probably
I also think being the 10th to the 15th best team in the world now is a legit accomplishment.
Yes.
Like I feel like that's the reference point of what constitutes a good team is being lost with given how much talent there is. I think being a 10th to the 15th best team in the world is a huge achievement, especially for a side like AGO. Yeah. So break it down to me, Sam, with sweet face. What happened?
21st of March 2018 in EPL, Space Soldiers beat AGO 16-2.
Okay.
Well, there were strong 2 rounds. Let me put that. No, that was March, dude. They're a different team now. RGL changed.
Sure.
They're a different team, dude.
Yeah, and to defend AGO, to qualify my insult to them, like if this was a North American team, Twitter would be spammed with like just constant praise of AGO. If it, like, remember like how the hyper energy when they were just bombing out tournament the first 2 times? Like this is like the first tournament and make it to the playoffs. Like I think they like had a great showing for the first tournament on LAN. You say they've been together for a while and playing a lot of online games, but yeah, credit to them for doing well in their first game. And even though I'll expect to see them again, you know, that is a pretty good accomplishment. But it's not Max. Sam, you mentioned maybe talking about NIP. They sort of went through this interesting player change recently. Is that why you wanted to bring them up? What was your thoughts?
I was just like, I was watching games. I was watching other games, other teams that we were featuring playing against NIP, and I was wondering if we were going to talk about them because obviously they just had a roster change.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what you guys thought about them. Like, I haven't done much research on them or anything. I'm just curious about your thoughts. That's all.
On
NIP. Change is weird. Like,
Golden's going to get kicked, right?
Sorry, just to bring this back, that fucking 16-2 game was on Nuke, and Xantares had 133 ADR. So I'm just counting that all together.
Was 20 and 4.
No, fuck off, dude. If more than 4 people in Space Soldiers have the 95% KAST, I'm just counting that result. Fucking Major in the 2+ rating does not count. Sorry.
The other game they played just before was on Mirage, and Space Soldiers won 16-4. So
fuck. This is the fucking Fnatic Astralis thing all over again, dude.
But they did lose. They did lose 2 best-of-3s on LAN to AGO. I remember. I just omitted that at the time.
So,
go ahead.
So are we talking about NIP?
NIP.
The roster change.
The roster change is weird. I mean, I didn't think Draken was like. I guess it's a personality thing. I didn't check in with the last couple By the Numbers episodes. Maybe they talked about it, but I don't know any of the behind the scenes stuff. I'm not a DM, a lord of like these guys over here. I'll try to figure this shit out. I guess I could have asked DK, but I don't think it happened yet. When we did that was a while ago when we did the episode with him.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a pretty long time ago, Sam. But anyway,
no, it was a week ago. No, so here's what's strange. So first thing that happens, Rez does an interview where he says, "Yeah, we're like all these weird vices. Like we're trying to make Draken more static." He literally said that, and then so that's weird. He said, "Oh, we're trying to create more space for me and Forrest." Like, okay, and Dennis, like, okay, that's interesting. Yeah. But then they kick Draken completely, and so I just thought that was the strangest change. Like why did you guys think that Draken had been particularly bad? You think because Draken last time that I had watched them, like I know his stats dipped a little bit, but that's because NIP has been really bad on LAN for a bit. But like last time I watched NIP with any attention, he was their best player by far. So it's a very strange.
Can Dennis and Forrest be better? Can they be a better AWPer duo than like Draken and Forrest or Draken and Dennis?
No, like Forrest has always been the AWPer that shouldn't be an AWPer. Who's okay, kind of like Shocks. Like you just probably shouldn't be AWPing. But like neither. What's weird is that like Dennis hasn't been very good. I don't think on this lineup. Forrest hasn't been very good on this lineup. Like it's just.
I think it makes sense, like role-wise, where you bring Lekro in, because I think he was a really good, like, sort of more passive component of the CT side for Fnatic, while also being able to find a lot of openings. So I guess if you want to bring like a site anchor, more passive person, and you're talking about wanting to make Draken more passive, then I think you do either bring in Exist or Lekro, and then I don't know so did Exist get bought in first to Fnatic, or did Lekro get kicked? Like how did the order of that happen? Was
it seemed, yeah, it seemed from many interviews that they were really just trying to get Exist on the team.
So it seems like a mutual sort of thing.
It just seems like they wanted Exist and decided, oh, who are you going to kick? Okay, like fuck Lekro. That's what it sounds like from many interviews where he said, like because Flusher recently did an interview where he's like, we've been trying to get Exist forever. Like, okay,
I don't get that. But that's just, I guess, a weird politics in Sweden.
To be honest, I think that Exist is probably the right kind of in-game leader for a Fnatic type team.
Especially like the one-to-one swap for Lekro. Like if you look at
Really,
the flip side,
you're really into that? I think that it would be make
Oh,
more,
yeah.
more sense if it was golden. Like I think
Oh.
that
yeah,
you know what I mean. Like it's just a really weird change. At the time, no one liked the golden change because Fnatic had just won a massive tournament, and then they proceeded to win another one, which was an okay tournament. But like for a while now, Fnatic's just been cruising. Like they've been decent, kind of like Mouse has been, and it seems like they've capped off. And if you want to let like now that their players are playing pretty well, and even like the JW has for the last few months has been better than he was for the last 2 years.
He's been really good JW.
Well, I still hate JW, but anyway. I think that actually you could cut JW and not exist. How about that? Because I think that
Cut
JW.
The biggest yes. No, I would. I think there's so many players you can remove on this Fnatic roster because it doesn't feel like anyone
but
except
Crims, right?
Yeah, no, it feels like a very modular team. Like you can definitely switch out components.
But I thought Lekro was their second best player. I thought that he was their game-breaking player in the sense that
he felt more like a third, like the wild card win condition that pushed them over the top. For
for sure in an optimal scenario, but in that team, I think that he was the second best player. Like I think
it was like Crims, Lekro, JW for you.
Yeah, for sure. Like
how far behind is JW to Lekro? Because in my head it's
a little bit, but like
a little bit. Yeah, gotcha.
But the reason why is because if like Fnatic have no way into a round, like they can just throw Lekro in mid on Mirage.
Spend $700 to give him a deagle and just let him open up an
or a deagle, or an he just walk around and
his aim is nuts.
Yeah,
his aim is nuts.
And I thought that was a big asset to Fnatic, especially since I didn't feel like he did a lot of really dumb plays. So I like players of his archetype normally would.
Yeah.
So it was weird for him. I just feel like it's a significant skill downgrade for Fnatic now that they've.
But on the flip side, like you bring that into NIP, where you're essentially getting like a budget Swedish Rain on like your NIP roster. Like I get around that pretty hard.
That's a good comparison. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, you're removing one of your core pieces. Like it's just a weird.
I mean, you're removing a high impact, like streaky, like not high impact, maybe but like bursty, like small bursts of impact, like a third guy that can have those game breaking rounds or the half breaking rounds, right? It's sort of a weird change where you're getting a similar thing where a guy with it could have these big impact rounds, but
it just seems to me like he.
Rifler sort of thing with now this voice or Dennis is gonna have to get over.
Because Lekro for Res, like that's a different move, you know what I mean? No.
Yeah.
Well, I just think that he has the same like player personality as Forrest and Dennis and Res and Lekro. Like I just think they're the same kinds of players. They're players that can play passive. Well, maybe not Dennis, but they're players that can play passive but have really good first bullet aim and can go in whenever, and they're not scared to go in. Like, and that kind of, maybe you could just run that, like, 2014 LDLC and just go death balls all around. But
there's going to be some sick highlight clips from this.
Sure. But I also feel like where's like your really solid anchor player in that team? Where's
Lekro?
No, you don't like. Who is Lekro going to hold B apps?
Yes, he does in Fnatic. He was Fnatic's like anchor for sure. Yeah.
Like B train,
such a Canadian thing, just like it's just like an old man. Just
like, I just think so. Here's an example. When NIP brought in Rez, he became their small stand anchor, and I think that in some sense, sure, you're you're like Karate Kid, and like wax on, wax off, teaching him to do the dirty shit. But at the same time, I feel like it really stunted his development because I feel like his confidence was shot from playing.
Except for IM Oakland.
Yeah, that one.
Except for that one tournament where he did well, and every other tournament he was quite bad.
But hey, that one tournament though, that was some good shit.
So, but I mean, like, so from the tournament, from recent tournaments as well, you can tell Rez is a really good player. But when you put him in certain positions, he doesn't excel. Like I wouldn't say that Lekro was excelling in Fnatic, but I think he can. And it's just weird to put him it's weird to put him in a team where his kind of style isn't needed. It's so not needed that the similar kind of player they added a year prior did what Lekro did in Fnatic and didn't grow. So it's just a weird thing. So
Yeah,
And
it's
the
a
whole
strange
point,
word.
the whole point of making Drake and Static was so that their aggressive riflers could be more aggressive. But now you have another aggressive rifler that's going to take the same space on T side.
Right.
What do you? What's the philosophy between Rhinus move?
It screams internal politics to me. That's what I was saying. The thing
Yeah,
with DK
yeah,
about the numbers
100%.
at the start. It doesn't. It seems like a very bizarre internal thing that doesn't. It just doesn't plot well on paper. Like it does. It just looks super bizarre to be planned.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
I also think Dennis as an IGL is just always like
Yeah.
there's so many things with this Snip roster where it just is leaning towards just like 5 friends who are all just fucking nuts at CS, just playing under this system that will produce. I honestly think the best. That's going to be my prediction for Nip, is that it's going to be the best frag movie of 2018, but they're going to make like maybe 2 playoffs.
no, it's depressing, man. That's really
Yeah.
depressing.
Not going to make the major. Do you reckon they'll make the major? Again, no Nip stickers.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know who's in the major qualifier.
Dude, there's like it's a pool of sharks. I was looking at the open qualifier, and it was I wanted to do a piece on Pronax, and I think his team Chaos, which has like Pyth, like Makalele himself, some rising Swedish talents, came 152nd at the open qualifier for the major. It's like, holy shit, dude.
Oh my god, that's
Did
insane.
Michael A call you out the other day for that MSL article? Did you feel?
Oh yeah, he's in a long line of people that I can no longer see in person without feeling awkward about.
So, it's a pretty juicy result for you, then. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, I think this is a pretty good way to end the episode. In lieu of sending Sam nice messages about his health or positive energy, just go ahead and go to the Reddit thread, hit that upvote thing.
Manipulation.
I think that's gonna do the best thing for Sam's health. He just needs that dopium high of a higher number on it. All right.